being a business owner is just like eating glass every day.
Nobody will care as much about your business as you will.
Like, seriously, most of your fears are on the other side of a lack of clarity on what the problem it is that you're trying to solve. If you can clearly identify the problem that you're trying to solve for, you've solved 50% of the issue.
When you first get into business, you are so grotesquely naive of what it is like to deal with people. One of the biggest mistakes that small business owners make is that
I'm sure it will work.
Hi. On today's episode of Out of Office, saying the shit that your employer would never have the balls to say to you. Where do you want to begin?
We just started the episode. You guys missed a good 3 minutes of here are the three things.
Here's the three things. I think that I'm going to speak for like business owners. That's where we're going to start.
Cool.
I think that
I'm an employee here, so I'll be the employee.
Cool. I think that when you first get started in business, and I'm not talking about like corporate America, I'm talking about like you're a small business owner and you're just like bootstrapping something from nothing. When you first get into business, you are so grotesquely naive of what it is like to deal with people and build a team and deal with clients and internal team members and vendors and service providers and everybody. Like, you're just delusional at how the world works. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that small business owners make is they assume that people will care as much about their business and the success of it and like the customer relationships and like everything involved that they do. Mm-hmm. And I think because they assume that and they have a false understanding of it, they don't put things in place that protect the business and hedge risk. I also think that it makes them a little bit soft and complacent when they should maybe be quicker to make decisions and fire people and remove them from the business. You make too many passes for shit that you shouldn't. Mm-hmm. I think another thing that small business owners are delusional about when they first get started, I'm going to pop the fuck off.
Are you airing your own grievances about you out too? Is that?
When I first started, for sure.
Okay, just making sure.
For sure, I was like naive. Oh my God, the stories that I have of shit that I've learned over the last couple years, like building a team and having like various people come through. Absolutely, I do not talk about things that I have not lived and experienced firsthand.
Just asking. No,
second thing is believing for a single second that an upset team member or customer will not tell stories through or won't tell stories without revisionist history of what happened.
Welcome to business and life, to be fair.
Somebody is upset, something happens, didn't turn out the way they wanted it to, or they believe that it should have. They have grievances. Mm-hmm. And they will absolutely tell the story, missing out on like critical pieces that put any level of responsibility
on themselves.
Yep. You're a piece of shit. You wronged me. Mm-hmm. This place was terrible. God, everyone was so unkind to me. Motherfucker, you didn't fill in your tracker. You didn't do the shit that you were supposed to. And you were coached and supported to be trained in all this. And then you still blatantly and deliberately chose to not do your job. And when you decided to not evolve and meet the standards of the company, you are weeping like a bitch when you were let go. So that's number 2. Upset people tell stories with revisionist history. And the third mistake is feeling sorry for people who live in a perpetual fear of being fired. Now, I get that somebody can feel concerned and anxious about something and need clarity and reassurance and to be supported in why something is happening. But if somebody lives in a chronic state of anxiety and fear, despite there being no true threat, why would you feel sorry for that person? And I say that because most people who live in a constant state of being fired typically have a reason to be fired.
Constant state of being fired or constant state of
fear?
Oh, you said constant state of being fired. I'm like, damn, you're just fired at everything. You're not allowed to go to the bathroom, no eating.
Like if you are always in a state of fear that you're going to be fired and lose your job, but there is no true signs around you, you've not been told anything, and maybe you've been coached, maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to, you're dropping the ball. And you just live in this constant state of anxiety that you're going to lose your job. Maybe there's things you're doing behind the scenes that you should be fired for.
Okay. All right, let's go bullet point by bullet point because I think it'd be great. Let's start with the first one. So what was your first statement?
What was your first grievance?
Yeah. What's the first thing you wanted to air out to the public before?
Business owners, and I would even apply this to this is people in general, but we'll just go through the lens of business owners.
Sure.
Nobody will care as much about your business as you will and what you are building.
Okay. Why?
Probably because there's no ownership to it. I think when you attach ownership in some sense of the mission and the vision to somebody, there's like a bigger buy-in. Like I think if you had if somebody got profit share.
Sure.
So like depending on level of access, but the majority of like entry level positions in a company, like do not give a fuck. I am here to clock in, clock out, get a paycheck, pay my rent, move forward. Like you don't give a fuck. You don't care. So I think the majority of people in the roles that they're in, like just, they're not, and it's also not their like role or responsibility to. Like no one's going to stay up on a Sunday working till 1 o'clock in the morning to get the job done, to support the client and customer who's like not likely the business owner or has something that they're like financially attached to or compensated for that like this would matter to drive things forward. And when you first get started, like you probably don't have enough funds, resources, or growth to even be able to offer that to somebody. So like that all falls back on you as the business owner.
I think that also teaches the best lesson of business, which is those of you who believe that the reason I started a business is because I can't work for somebody else are dumb enough to think that that narrative is going to keep you in business. Because when you become the business owner or when you launch a startup, whatever it is, you work for everybody. And it is then your job to understand what makes people tick, what drives them, why, what they want, what they care about, and find a way to take the bigger picture of what you're creating and fit what they want within that. And I think that's the thing people are most challenged with. Because most people, I don't want to say most, many people get into launching, starting, building a business on the premise of, oh, well, I can't work for somebody else. I can't work for other people. I can't. It's the most fascinating, like, narrative on the internet, in my opinion. Oh, I launched it because whatever. It's like, got it. So you're basically saying you're an asshole and you don't want to work. Like, honestly, if that is where you start from, 0% chance you will ever be palatable to work with. Like none. 100%. I think the other thing too, and I've noticed this, I think for most people, especially if they get into the art of building a business from scratch with not much width of business experience, you will 100% be convoluted into not being able to see all the things that come with it. And I'm gonna give you an example. I think the fact, for me personally, and this is just, I'm speaking from the standpoint of having gone employee of the business, and I work for everybody. Lucky for me, I get to work for everybody. I think until you've seen either a startup environment or a larger scale environment, and you put together just how many pieces it is required to make the machine move, like you can hate corporate America and say, hey, they're too big to fail, whatever. The sheer volume of what is required for a company like FedEx, for example, to work and exist and operate is fucking terrifying to think about. It is. Like, you don't really understand. Like, I think there's a lack of awareness for most people of just what is required at that scale. And if you can't even understand it in the environments you're in, there's no way you're going to ever, one, get to that, or be able to see, like, within you that there's a smaller scale version of that. Because, like, I look at what that is, because I can use that as my own example. I remember standing inside of the hub in Memphis and watching these conveyor belts and package systems. There was no human intervention here. Somehow the conveyor belts know, based on a scanning system, that this package is going to this plane because that plane is going to LA. And this fucking machine is running millions of packages through it. And I'm watching, now this is inside the system. Now you go look outside in the airport. every, I think, 13 seconds or something like that, there's a plane landing with a FedEx logo on it. And every 13 seconds, somebody's taking off with a FedEx logo of it. This made my brain hurt. Because you know what everybody else sees? Everybody else sees the package got from my place to your place. Oh, it costed $7 and it was 5 minutes late.
Fuck my life.
But here's the thing. Until you've either seen how quickly you have to move in a startup environment, or you can truly see the pieces that drive a large-scale business, when you go to build your own business, your perception of what is required is fucking so skewed, it's not even funny. Even like people we know who are great business owners, in my opinion, I'll even talk to them and I'm like, do you have any idea? Bro, you have it easy. You tell people to eat protein and lift weights for a living. When you get into, I have team, I have employees, I have large clients, I have products, I have services, there are so many pieces that go into this. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to launch a business and be a millionaire.
Yeah.
And then the best part is they think I'm going to launch a business and do $1 million in revenue, and therefore I'm a millionaire, not realizing that there's costs associated with that $1 million that you just generated. And it actually takes you probably about minimum double that to net $1 million, and it probably takes you about 4 times that to net $1 million after taxes. But I'm going to be a millionaire because I did 7 figures in revenue.
T. Mm-hmm.
So I think the conversation there is, why did you get into business? Because that will then, if you're getting into the business for the process, the journey, the art, your conception about what is required is probably not the same as the person who's like, whatever predisposition you had as to why you started your business. I noticed that to be a big difference in who I've met entrepreneur-wise who started on a whim, and then the people I meet who start businesses later in their careers. Like, if you go look at a lot of the best founders or whatever, like, they're older. Like, the 20-year-old kid with an internet business is not going to be the next Elon Musk. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, you can wish that. Or Zucks. Like, everybody's looking to be the unicorn. A lot of people have career experience, which gives them the perspective to be good. But the perspective someone like Jeff Bezos comes from when he launches Amazon is very different than the perspective I think your internet person comes from. But Jeff Bezos' background is working in a company for a period of time. And I think, and this is where I think a lot of people mess it up, there's actually nothing wrong with working for someone else. It's the fastest way to learn the skills and the lessons you need to avoid all the things I think the average entrepreneur goes through when they launch.
Yeah, I agree. I still think there's things that, like, when you launch, dealing, like, with what I said at the beginning, dealing with people, like, you're delusional at what is required from, like, just a sheer work capacity standpoint of, like, what you have to build and do and create and how fast you need to move. I also think that there is an extreme delusion of what it takes to build and lead a team of people. And I think not every person listening to this is probably went the path of, like, I worked in corporate and I have all this experience. So you have, like, 2 camps. You have the people where it's like, okay, maybe you're later in life and you build a business and you have more experience and there's just some things that you're not going to struggle with as much. And then there's still the camp of people where it's like, I'm just, like, bootstrapping something from nothing, and this is 100%. The path I went. I think what bogs us down when we start building a team is being delusional that they are going to care as much as you do.
Right. So you're going to have beliefs that
fundamentally, like, don't help you. I also think people in business are, like, this is going to sound really harsh, but it's like, nobody is going to care about your business as much as you do. Nobody's going to care about the success of what you're trying to create as much as you do. Your job is to find the right people and create a vision that they can meet their goals within it. Yes, as equally as it's your job to fire anybody and remove them that doesn't belong in that environment as well. I can think of countless clients that we've spoken to at different times who hate their business because they kept people in it that, like, you lowered the bar.
Yes.
You brought people in. They didn't meet the standard. They didn't do what was needed to. And instead of being like, then you're out, and this isn't the right place for you, you kept them, but you lowered the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And then you became resentful
Mm-hmm.
because you were delusional that person was going to care as much about it as you do. And I think there are people out there that do care and they do value those things and they're intrinsically driven towards that. Find them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're having a difficult time filling a role, to the best of your ability, figure out how you can automate it and systematize it, depending on what business you're in and what you are creating. But I think that breeds a lot of resentment for business owners where you like tolerate shit that you shouldn't on the team and you just want people to be something other than what they are.
I think part of it too is, especially in an early stage business, so like I'll take startups out of this because they have funding. So like you can go get talent you can go pay more money to get talent because you have a pool of money behind you. Like the average person who starts a business doesn't have like 10 people backing them and hundreds of millions of dollars to piss into the wind with, right? I think what people very much struggle with, and I've seen this when I first started working with you, and I've seen this with everybody we've talked to, just how rudimentary and simple you have to make every single thing. Like I remember the first time even we talked about this, I was like, this system has to be so simple that if we hired a homeless person, they could do it. I just remember the look on your face, like, I can't believe we have to make this simple. And I think with most business owners, that is something that they struggle with. Like if you're going to hire someone to do a role and you can't break it down to be that simple, I think the other side of it, what happens is you didn't break it down so simply and have a standard for what that looks like from the beginning, that you have a you will keep tolerating something because you don't even know where you missed the ball. Mm-hmm. Your thought was, and I'll give you an example, what comes intuitively to you or myself is very different than what comes intuitively to a member of our team. But sure, when you or I communicate to the team what something needs to look like, it is so spoon-fed in details. And this is something I think the guy who started Gymshark, there was a clip I saw and I thought this was so true. He's like, in certain ways, you have to be a dictator at the beginning. Like some of the autonomy of letting people figure it out, when you don't have any money behind you, you need to learn quickly. I have to make this the most spoon-fed version of this and basically ask you to do it. When you can't afford a lot of talent. Like most people, when they're starting a business, you can't afford to go find someone to do a role that is like a high-level person. If you have a business partner, that's helpful. But even then, it's like you and I can only go to a degree. Everything else has to get spoon-fed. And I think that's another thing that people struggle with is like, I think people want the standard to be high. I think what they forget is, going back to the original statement, they don't see that person isn't going to care about their business as much as they do. So then they also create the belief that, okay, well, they will understand how I operate just by being around me or watching me. But it's like, motherfucker, that you didn't communicate what you're looking for to such a granular level that it's like, I'm not going to miss this. If I look at our team, the people who I would consider probably our highest executors, like are very good about certain things. They've been here the longest, and they have a pretty high threshold of experience with you. And I say that lovingly. I can think of a number of people here who are like, they just, at this point, 3 years in, they just know, like, this is how Nat wants it. I'm not even going to bother trying to not go to that grain. But they didn't know that when they got here. And I think what has to happen, and you can save 3 years of time in the process, you have to be willing, as you hire people, to spend the additional time to teach people and work on the simplest, most baseline operating procedures. And be okay with the fact that they're not going to be you. And don't expect that.
I agree. When I look back, like if I was to brand new day one, and I'm like speaking to like a brand new business owner and don't have the experience and the lessons learned that I do, when I come back to the constant, like what I keep saying, the mistake is like you believe people will care as much as you do. When you remove that and you're like, nobody will care as much as you ever for the rest of your fucking life. So if I believe that to be true, then that means that I have to have SOPs. I have to be detailed. I have to be communicating how much energy and effort it takes to acquire a client and build a relationship and everything that goes into it to ensure that this is successful to the best of my ability, because I trust me to build the things to ensure you can do your job. Because like at 9:00 when I'm laying on the couch doing nothing, I'm thinking about how to make this business better. You are not.
100%.
You are at home doing your own thing, which is totally cool. Love that for you. But I am responsible for the business and making sure this is successful. I also think newer business owners or newer leaders and team members don't want to feel like they're a dictator. And
Yes.
I want to give you autonomy and freedom and like let you flow, until you realize that letting somebody do that is going to ransack your ability to create an outcome. Because if somebody doesn't have guardrails and they're not clear on what they're doing and they're not held to a standard, and hey, these are the values, and they're not trained towards that, they're not even going to hit remotely close to what you need them to do. And then it's not going to be successful, and it's going to cost you money, and you're not going to be able to pay your bills, and then you're going to be fucking pissed, and you're going to want to fire everybody.
So I'm going to use a term that we use internally. It's called skill issue. Okay. I think when you start as a quote unquote leader in a business, like let's say you're starting from the beginning, here's your first skill issue. You are not actually that good at the thing that you're trying to build.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, there are more constraints that are required as you build. Now, once you get to a certain point, which you'll be able to identify as you evolve, you will by nature have a skill that attracts a different type of person, which means the amount of constraints with the next level of person is very different than it was at startup. Someone who runs a brand new company or is starting from scratch has a whole different skill set than the person who runs a $10 million business, whole different person as a $100 million business. I think part of it as an individual is to just be able to accept that in the current environment, there are constraints as to who you are. And you are often the biggest constraint in your business at every level, depending on what you're at. So early stage, it's very much skill. Middle stage is probably human capacity. And then at higher stage, it's who can you network with? Like, what are those bigger partnerships? I find most people have a hard time getting past that first level. Because if you talk to a new business owner, what are you good at? They will, oh my God, the people will tell you how good they are at coaching or making products or stuff that people like. And I'm like, that's cool. But like, if you're so good, how come you haven't attracted people that can help you with that know what to do? And I think what people have to accept more than anything is it is always a skill issue right off the rip. That's what I heard as you were talking. I was like, these are just skill issues that are going to show up in different forms. Can you accept that? It's up to you. Because I think what you said was very accurate. It's like nobody's going to care. And it's your job to identify the skill gap with you, not with everybody else. You will never be good at identifying skill issues with other people until you've identified where you have to be better first. And I think that's something a lot of people have a difficult time with. And I've heard it from business owners. They're like, oh, nobody will ever care like I do. I go, awesome. I agree with you. Where do you have to, if that's true, let's go right to you. Where do you have to get better?
SOPs, bitch. I also think, and again, there's like no blanket statement for like all people in every situation across the board. Like there's nuance to things. I think a lot of people, what I said, they don't want to be dictators. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we want to be liked more than we want to lead, because it is uncomfortable to be clear and direct and just lay it right the fuck out there for everybody. And if you have never remotely close in your life had to practice that or develop that, like even if you worked in a career and like you gained a bunch of skills working for somebody else, but you were never in a position where you had to learn how to like be direct, be okay maybe at times with what is perceived as confrontation, negotiate different things like that. It is so incredibly difficult to uphold a standard because like you want to be liked more than you want to upset somebody. And then everything comes back to like your own internal world. And I think there's two extremes. Like you have the extreme that's like, I don't give a fuck. And you just are confrontational at times. And then that creates its own world of problems because you're probably a bit aggressive and the way that you communicate things lacks some humanness, or you're maybe on the other extreme where you're just such a people pleaser that oh, fuck, I can't say that. What if it upsets them? So you don't. And then you perpetuate issues. And then you get upset when things blow up in your face because you don't want to address it. So even if you're new and you have experience through your career, like there's so much you have to develop skill issue wise with your own interpersonal work to be able to like create what the fuck you want to with a group of people. And it never goes away. Like you're always growing and you're always
100%.
improving. Like there's never going to be a Wednesday that you wake up and you know what, nailed it for the rest of my life. There's no more room for me to grow and evolve as a person.
Yeah, also, like, here's the other thing. Being a business owner is just like eating glass every day. No, I'm serious. Like, I've talked to people who run large companies. It's the same shit. You don't think that happens when the company gets bigger? The only difference is you have more support systems to eat more glass. That is all that happens.
You've also ate enough of it that you're just
like, cool. It's just glass. Like, at some point, it's
a
just
little
glass.
callous down
Yeah,
there.
it's like, oh, it's already a little rough in there. It's not a big deal. It's eating glass.
It's so true.
It's eating glass, and then it's like, I think Elon Musk says it. He's like, I think he says it's eating shard and then staring down an abyss. And eventually it's like, it's no longer staring down an abyss. It's just like you're eating glass. It's literally what it is.
So it kind of leads into like my second thing that I was like, one of the biggest mistakes that like business owners make is not believing that upset people will have revisionist history. Part of eating glass is when you do uphold a standard and maybe somebody gets let go or it doesn't work out or you upset a client. Like you disappoint. Like you're going to disappoint a lot of fucking people because they have their own expectations and frustrations and areas that they fall short, and then people don't want to take responsibility. Sure. I think a part of eating glass per se when you are growing a business is being okay with the fact that like you're going to make mistakes and people aren't going to like you and you can't let that debilitate you.
100%.
And it's not even that they don't like you, it's that they don't like something in themselves, but it is very difficult the first couple rounds of that to not take things completely personal and let it derail you.
100%. 100%. But here's the other thing is like, they're going to have revisionist history until it's so clear that when they're having it, that when it's black and white to you where you didn't miss, you don't even care that it happened. I'm gonna explain to you something that I watched happen with a couple people that I'm personally friends with. I've watched people where it's like I lose a client, I lose customer's mad, whatever. And I'm like, cool, you guys just didn't set the expectation. But they're so debilitated that the customer's mad. And they're like, oh, it's revisionist history. I was like, where did you miss in communication? Let's start there. There will come a point where you get so good at being simple, clear, to the point, etc. And I'm going to use the Apple product as like the perfect example of this. They tell you how the product works. They put it in the packaging. They they even tell you in the packaging, there's like a little pamphlet that says, here's how you turn the fucking phone on. They have a customer support line to support. They make it so simple that if you call mad about something so rudimentary, they're like, cool, humans are gonna get mad or get frustrated. We're not gonna sit there and be mad if we lose a customer because we gave you everything and all this. But I think the thing that people get challenged with, going back to like the first point, there are so many simple little things that you haven't created systems or SOPs around that revisionist history happening isn't exactly not revisionist history. It's just not the full truth. Mm-hmm. And it's not the customer's job to understand everything about what you offer. It is your job to put everything in place. Now, if they're negligent, different story. Hey, this box says it right on it. Here's the pamphlet. You got the email. This was communicated. No issue. You lose a customer that way, that's a lot easier to solve. But I find for most people, the challenge is what you just were kind of pointing out to. It's like, it's revisionist history until it's not revisionist history. Because then when you look at it, it's like, cool, you're just looking for a reason to be mad. I'm not going to entertain it. But until you've learned to make it that, and I also think going to conversations we had before, it's no different than relationships. It's like, were you crystal clear with that person, who you are, what you value, what that looks like in the breakdown? I love when people tell you, oh yeah, like I was super clear with her, and I don't know why she's mad. And then you'll ask them, and then by the time you ask them 2 or 3 questions, like, so you never actually said this. Well, I think I thought it was like implied. Implied, got it. So now you think people can read your mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's the situation in business.
I agree with all that wholeheartedly. I think it takes, like, you have to develop the stomach to put those things in place so you
100%.
can get to the point that it is that clear.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you first start, like, you don't even know what you don't know.
Yeah, 100%.
You bring somebody in, you sell them, or you onboard a team member, like either or. It could be a client, it could be a team member. You bring them in, something gets missed, an opportunity comes up or a challenge, and you're like, fuck, okay, we got to build something for that. Cool. Like, it's just this never-ending problem-solving state of find a problem, solve it, build the next thing, and keep going. It takes so much courage to
100%.
do that. Because, yes, you will get to a point one day where you're like, this is so black and white that, like, cool, product works as designed. Reboot the fucking phone and fuck off.
100%.
But it takes.
Reboot the fucking phone and fuck off is the line right there. I'm going to write that down. Reboot the phone and fuck off. Heard.
But it takes courage to get to, like, go through so many iterations, something to build that. And I think, whoever's listening to this that's, like, newer in business, it's like, this is just part of it. And it's what you have to do. And I think it can also be, like, when you're going through it, if you don't have a bunch of people around you who are entrepreneurial, building a business, like, really putting themselves out there to, like, build and grow something, like, who the fuck do you talk to about this? It's like, the sheer volume of 2x4s you take to the face building a business and then, like, stand back up, solve the problem, and keep going is so intense. But it's also so worth it.
100%.
But it takes an immense amount of courage.
Here's the other side of it. That's if you believe that eating the glass is worth it.
I believe eating the glass is worth
it. 100%. But there are a lot of people, and I actually experienced this recently with someone who we used to work with. You don't think it's worth it anymore. And that there's a host of reasons for that. Mm-hmm. But it's like, maybe that isn't your path to learn those lessons. Maybe you're not meant to be the owner, and that's okay. But those lessons are still going to come in life, whether you run the business or you're a human. Mm-hmm. At some point, you have to be willing to accept the fact that it is eating glass and staring down an abyss, and that is also okay. It's not the end of the world.
I just get better at eating glass over time.
Of course. You don't even think it's glass at that point. You're like, oh, it's like fucking Cheetos. It's the same thing.
This is Tuesday.
Seriously, and I also think too, like,
what another Tuesday.
I think part of this that I find for most people is if you make this journey about you learning about yourself emotionally and how you handle things, a lot of this will get alleviated faster.
I agree.
I think for a lot of people when they start business, it's very hard for them to look, because they have the narratives that they have where it's like, oh, I need to start a business for X, Y, and Z reason, because they're so fixated on the reason and they don't look in the mirror. Those lessons just continuously become painful. And I'm like, if you actually started the journey of building a business by looking within as you built it, you would probably avoid so many things. If you make it a conversation, this is to every business owner that's early on, if you make it a conversation about where you fell short in your responsibility, that I can pretty much blindly guarantee you will deal with considerably less pain and headaches. Considerably less. It's not saying it's avoidable, but the things that you get challenged with will not feel so difficult to deal with.
Yeah. I'm going to add something to that because I agree. And I also think people fuck this up and then they exhaust themselves. So everything is my responsibility. Everything that exists outside of me is my fault. Mm-hmm. Cool. Sometimes people will keep team members longer than they should and clients than they should because they're like, well, I didn't do X, Y, and Z,
100%.
So I'm going to tolerate this. And sometimes what taking responsibility looks like is making the difficult call.
Yes.
And that letting that person go.
Yes.
Ending that client relationship. Being like, I shouldn't have sold that person on the sales call. These 3 things were red flags. I didn't think anything of it. I brought them in. It was a dumpster fire decision. Because I've watched so many business owners be like, well, everything's 100% my fault. And then they assume responsibility for everything. And they do not hold anybody accountable. And they do not make difficult decisions because they're like, well, this is on me. Yeah. Also, what's on you is like sometimes you have to fucking fire somebody. And then figure out how to minimize bringing that type of person in the future and putting stuff in place.
That problem you just explained it's your responsibility, and it's also your responsibility to be good at communicating. That's the downstream thing that I think people struggle with. But when you're
in it, like, people get stuck because they're like, someone's going to listen to this and be like, absolutely right. Everything in my business is 100% my responsibility and my fault. Sweet. And then they will not make decisions that they know they need to. Because they will go back to, well, I did it wrong to begin with. And sometimes, like, there's some decisions that you just know you need to make, but you put off and you justify it with, well, this looks like me taking responsibility. I can't tell you the amount of people I've talked to where it's like, why the fuck didn't you fire this person? And it just justified. And it's like, well, because I was told that this was my fault and to take responsibility and, like, zero critical thinking.
That's the thing. You just said the piece that everybody seems to suck with in modern day society.
-5.
No critical thinking.
And then they just continue to, like, take on the shit. Yeah, without ever challenging
100%.
their own thought process to how they're doing stuff.
100%. It is equally, like, and I've seen this with people. Cool, that person made a mistake. You didn't communicate it. I got one better. What is that person, that role? What are the standards of that role? Communicate it, map it, show it to them. And the moment they keep fucking, if they repeat, it's one thing to make a mistake once, right? Like, I'm not here to eviscerate anybody, but make it black and white. Going back to the systems thing, I think the other reason is they don't communicate it because they haven't made it black and white in communication for that person. And then they're like, oh, well, that was on me. Well, that was on me. It's like, okay, if you want it to stop being on you, make it black and white so that the people around you are also clear. That's the reality. What was your third grievance?
My third grievance is that...
In case anybody's watching, we call it grievances for a reason. It's not points. It's just grievances.
Yeah.
Yeah, just onward. That's good.
I think shit comes up in the workplace. Somebody feels uncertain and they're like, I'm scared that I'm going to be fired. And you see it all the time. And people will be like, we need a safe workplace environment. And I'm scared that I'm going to get fired. And, like, people are scared they're going to be laid off here and all of this stuff. And it's like, okay, cool. And I find it very interesting that there's usually one or two people that speak on the behalf of everybody, but when you start speaking to people individually, they do not all share the same consensus. Now, if you have a group of people and you go to each individual person and you say, hey, I would love to have a one-to-one conversation with you. I've heard this. Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel unsafe here? Like, you can't speak up. And that is, like, a common thing across the board, and everybody tells you that. Then, like, cool. Probably something that you should look into. 100%. Now, if you have a group of people and there's, like, one or maybe one or two people, and you're the only two that feel that way out of an entire group of people, okay, well, why do you feel that way? Like, let's sort through that. Is it something that was said? Is it something that you're noticing? Do you feel unclear about something? Like, help me understand where this fear is coming from. Cool. You have a conversation. You address, maybe it's like you need more training. You need to change the communication. I need more support from you in this way. And, like, you go and you do those things and you actively work to solve it. And that fear stays and continues to perpetuate. Most people at that point who are fearful of being fired have a reason to be fired.
100%.
And what I mean by that is that you are doing something or you're not doing what the fuck you're supposed to. And that is eating at you. And then it is projected outward on everybody else. Because if you're the only person on a team and you've had that conversation, you're the only one that feels that way, like, put the mirror inward. And I think business owners get fixated. Again, no critical thinking. go talk to other people, figure this out. But if there's like one or two people, it's just constant outlier that like you live in this perpetual state of discomfort. Dude, what are you not fucking doing that you're supposed to be? And then more times than not, you find out they get let go and there is a slew of shit that they hadn't been doing for
100%.
or things were buried or there were other issues with team members or people on the team and communication. It's like, no wonder you were so uncomfortable every day. Like, how could you tolerate being in this environment when you live like
here's
that?
what this rings into my head because I watched this. I remember there was the whole Elon buys Twitter, which becomes X, right? And he fired 80% of the employees there, right? And people were bitching and screaming. And I think the one thing that there was two things that became very clear. One, it doesn't take as many people to do the job as everybody thinks. That's one. But two, one thing that he does that I think more business owners need to do is he is very comfortable and okay with, and there's the stories at SpaceX and Tesla, and I slept in the manufacturing, and like he's probably one of the only CEOs, to be fair, that does it this way. Mark Andreessen had spoken about this. He will go find the person who is most competent and in charge and most engaged with the current problem in the business every single week, and he will go talk to them. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's just problem solving. It's not about the problem solving. I think when you build a culture where it doesn't matter who they are aware that the person who is quote unquote at the top has the capacity to be like, I'm human, I'm here to be with you, repeatedly demonstrates that. I'm not saying you can completely avoid what you just said. I think those things reveal themselves so much faster, and in a culture of high standards, the tolerance for that gets removed quickly. Like you just don't. And for anybody who's a business owner, if you're trying to figure out, okay, like someone's always in this state of I'm gonna get fired, you have to do the thing that I'm aware most people don't like doing, which is the unscalable behaviors, which is be involved in the human interaction. Don't let, I know as you grow an organization, you have managers and VPs and all this other shit that are responsible. But the moment the people around you lose the pulse of feeling like you're in your fucking castle and they're down here like a bunch of peasants working, it becomes exceedingly difficult for them or for the culture to continue to evolve. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people miss is like you will nip a lot of that in the butt by creating a culture where everybody is on the same playing field. But I think what happens a lot of times, and we've experienced this too, they see like the gap between like the different levels of who's in charge of what, and they see it as like, oh, this person reports to this person who reports to this person, so he's here, I'm here. There is no communication basis for this. And I think part of what you have to do is, even if you create management positions and roles in between, the communication has to be open, and that is done through practice. You have to be willing to talk to people even as the company grows. It gets very difficult, I'm aware of that. Like I don't think at the Apple size, they have the CEO has the capacity to talk to the newest employee, but there has to be the understanding that that is there. Not that it has to be an everyday thing, but that opportunity for communication is always there. So that's what came to my mind was like, you will nip that in the butt faster. And I do agree with you. If you live in a perpetual state of fear, there's a reason for it, especially from the employee's end. And here's the other thing that I think from an employee standpoint, you have a responsibility to do. If you are actively participating in a company where you feel fearful, it is your job to communicate what you are afraid of and what you do not feel clear on. Because what I think happens, and I've watched it happen in corporate, and I've seen it happen even in small business, there's pushback from management, or there's pushback from the company, or the company wants to do a certain way. And what the employees tend to do is they tend to give you all the reasons why that won't work. That is not critical thinking, going back to the point before. So I think part of it is learning a dual function of compassion. When you see something, if you feel like you live in a state of fear, like there's high standards, there's a lot of change, I'm all for it. We understand that from a human standpoint. Get clear on what it is that the outcome is that everybody wants and the principles that drive those outcomes. And there's a higher likelihood that you can have healthy communication around what that actually looks like and not the interpretation I think most employees have. Because I've seen the other side of it where it's, their default state, the employee default state is, oh my god, it's all fucked, everything's going to go to hell, etc. Like mergers, especially when companies merge, there's a lot of that. I've seen it be like, oh my god, like we're blending, like where's everything go, how does this work? And it's like, you need to be able to help the people in charge of the decision making understand what you guys need clarity on. Otherwise, if you guys are unclear, I would understand why you think you're going to get fucking fired. Like, seriously, most of your fears are on the other side of a lack of clarity on what the problem it is that you're trying to solve. If you can clearly identify the problem that you're trying to solve for, you've solved 50% of the issue as it is. That's half the battle. The same people who are in perpetual fear, they are not even clear on the problem they're trying to solve for. So if you have no clarity on what problem you're trying to solve for, how the fuck are you not going to be scared all the time?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at this through the employee's lens and you heard what Nat said and you're like, well, I'm not that person. Like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Cool, awesome. Maybe that's true. Let's go in the hypothetical world that is true. So you just live in this perpetual state of fear at your company. What is the problem you are trying to solve for? I can tell you blindly, anybody listening to you can't give us a fucking answer.
What was going to come out of my mouth is the best way to update your resume to find a new job. That's the problem you're trying to solve for.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I'll give you an example of where I've seen this happen that a lot of people don't see. One company buys the other, they go into a merger. You are so unaware and so unclear about how that company that just bought you operates and how they're going to get involved, that in the back of your head, you're like, oh, I know how this goes. They're going to fire people. They're going to do this. They're known for doing this. And it's like, great. Go communicate your stuff to them, how you feel. See how they respond to you. If they give you the blanket answer of like, oh, this is all going to be, and they don't address your core issues clearly for you, it's probably time for you to go find something else. And sometimes it may not even be that you're doing things wrong. It's just their way of doing business and how you've been doing it to this point suggests that it's no longer the right marriage for you. And it's time to leave. But that's a clear identification of a problem.
Agreed. I also think there's a layer of this where you can have clear communication, be clear on the problem you're solving, and at some point you have to decide as an individual that you gotta let shit go.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a conversation and it's clear and it's identified and this is what needs to be done, and you just keep reverting back to old shit,
100%.
and you can't, then like, what are we doing? Because you're just clinging on to the past. Like,
yes.
People make mistakes, shit fucks up, things break all the time. Welcome to life.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot go through that stuff, have a conversation, address things, get clear, problem solve, and move forward without stockpiling all of your issues behind you, then like you are still the problem in the situation. People love to do that. You see it in relationships all the time. People will bring up shit that happened 12 fucking months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let it go, man. And then you hold on to that, and it keeps you in this state of fear.
No, you're waiting.
Yeah.
You're waiting. That is the way most people
And what's funny is that when people do that, they don't even see how that ends up perpetuating the reason that they actually end up getting fired.
Yeah, or the relationship ends, or they end up in a divorce. 100%.
Oh my God, I'm so scared I'm going to lose my job. Then it gets addressed, and then you just live in this perpetual state of fear. You are constantly...
Yeah.
Excuse after excuse. I don't want to do this. I don't want to move. And it's like, cool. You end up then coming across as resistant to change and everything. Mm-hmm. And you end up getting removed from the role, which is just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
100%. And if you're resistant to a change that is consistently communicated to you, there's something deeper lying there. So, like, if you don't want to change based on what is required for something to move forward, there's something else internally or a belief system that you have around your life that leads you there. And that is the one. Again, that goes back to its personal responsibility. If there are people or situations in the work, your relationships, etc., where people are asking you for change and you're resistant to it, it's your responsibility to figure out what is the reason, the real reason you're resistant. Not because you don't care, but what is the reason I'm so resistant to this relationship or change in this or whatever? Is it a values discrepancy? Is it an understanding discrepancy? But that's up to you to be clear on. Because when you are clear with two people, you can have differences in perspective, yet if you understand you're standing on common ground, change isn't so difficult. Cool, we want the same things. It's easy to change. Pivot, adjust, however, whatever word you want to use. There's often a lack of clarity. Mm-hmm. That's a tough pill for people to swallow. Get clear. Yeah, solve all of these issues. All 3 of your grievances are solved on the other side of being clear. It sounds crazy, but
every grievance in life is on the other side of being clear. Mm-hmm. Like, I could give you 7 things from like an operation standpoint that's dumb. It would all boil down to like, there's just lack of clarity of like the purpose, what this looks like, how is it done, and then like what is the outcome or objective that you're mapping towards.
Clarity is also being able to see things for what they are, not what you wish them to be. Then those are 2 different things that most people do not understand.
Yeah, last thing, I guess kind of like last point before we wrap this up. If I was listening to this as somebody in like dealing with a member on the team where maybe they're like scared, I have the conversation and that keeps showing up and like there's still resistance. 100%. Cool. My thought, if I was like brand new, didn't know what to do with this, would be, where do I draw the line at this being like a fucking therapy session with somebody at work for them to get clear on what they need? And like, where's my harmony between you have some shit in you, like maybe there's like a value discrepancy, you have a belief of how this is going to change your personal life or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. How do I find the harmony between understanding that might be the thing, but like, I'm not your fucking therapist?
I think there's 2 things. 1, you're clear on the values, and then 2, you're also clear on the problem at hand and how those 2 things go hand in hand. I think sometimes what happens for us is we identify a problem, but the way we're handling the problem is not consistent with the values that we say we do at the company. So I'll give you an example. If there's a problem at the company and we're just continually dismissing the employees and the employees are pushing back, it's pretty easy to see why that's happening. If we are being understanding, communicating, practicing who we say we are, and identifying problems, and the employees are still being resistant, that would indicate it's an employee. The employee's the issue.
Cool. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah. I'm at that point in the conversation. Mm-hmm. So this is the problem is identified. The way we are approaching it is congruent with who we say we are as a company. Every, like, transparency is there. Yeah. How do I approach that conversation with saying, like, you need to get clear for you on, like, what you want and if you want to be here without that turning into a therapy conversation. Like, to be able to sit across from somebody and be like, this is the problem, this is how we're going to solve it, this is congruent with our values. There's still resistance here, which leads me to believe that you might be misaligned with this. It doesn't align with your values or what you want out of your personal life. I can't make that decision for you. You need to get clear on that for you. Mm-hmm.
You asked the question, is there a way we can better support you in understanding?
Cool. And the person says no, and then they continue to...
Then you make it very clear. We showed you what we stand for. We identified the problem and helped solve it based on who we say we are. We equally asked you for clarity for how we support it. You said no. You then continue to perpetuate the same behavior. It is so clear. This is not the right fit for you. We wish you the best. And you make the decision and you let them go. And it's not an indictment on them. It's not an indictment on you. It's this is what is the right thing to do based on the context of the situation. But that is your job on the side of the business owner and on the side of whoever's in charge of making those decisions, depending on the context, is on you. Sometimes you have to make the decision that other people are not willing to make. Mm-hmm. Super easy.
Ding, ding, ding. If you can't decide, I'll decide for you. I'll decide for both of us.
This is a personal thing. If for most people listening, either you will make the decision or life will make the decision for you. And I will tell you from experience, it's usually a better idea for you to make your own decisions and learn your own lessons on your own time and not let life do it.
Hurts less.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. Subscribe to everything. Buy it. I don't even know what you're buying, but
send this to your terrified employee. Just kidding.
Send this to your executive or founder that doesn't understand how to be a human yet.